My name is Jade Washington, and I am 31 years old. If you look at the hospital logs from 5 days ago, you will see the exact moment my heart stopped. On the night of February 27th, 2026, I died in the middle of my living room. I need to tell you what I saw because it changes everything about how we are living right now. Before that night, I was a senior designer for a major tech firm. I worked from home, tucked away in my small office, building the interfaces you use every day. My life was defined by logic and efficiency. I spent my hours staring at strings of logic, making sure every pixel was perfect and every user path was seamless. I was obsessed with the way humans interact with machines. I thought I was making the world more connected. The night it happened, Austin and I were finally taking a break. We had turned on some music in the living room. He pulled me into his arms and we were dancing slowly. It was the first time in weeks I hadn't been looking at a screen. I remember the warmth of his chest and the smell of his cologne. We were laughing about something small. Then, without warning, a sharp, strange pressure filled the back of my skull. It wasn't a pain I could describe. It felt like a bubble of air was expanding inside my brain. Everything went quiet. The music didn't stop, but I couldn't hear it anymore. I felt a soft pop, like a thread snapping. My legs went heavy and the room tilted. I saw Austin's face change from a smile to pure terror, but I couldn't tell him I was okay. The world just dimmed, like a lamp being turned off, and the last thing I felt was his arms trying to catch me as I fell. But I didn't disappear into a void. It wasn't like falling asleep or hitting a wall of nothingness. Instead, it was like a heavy, stifling veil had been lifted from my eyes. I felt a sudden, incredible lightness, a freedom I hadn't known since I was a small child. I was hovering near the ceiling, looking down at our living room. I saw Austin kneeling over me, his hands shaking as he dialed emergency services. I saw him crying, his voice cracking as he spoke to the operator, pleading for help. I saw my own body, pale and still on the rug, my hair fanned out around my head. Strangely, I felt no fear. I didn't feel the panic of a dying woman. I felt a deep sense of relief, as if I had just taken off a heavy, soaking wet coat after a long walk in the rain. I watched the paramedics arrive. I saw the way they moved with frantic precision, the way they tried to jumpstart my heart. But from my perspective up there, those machines and those wires looked so primitive. They were trying to fix a vessel that I no longer inhabited. I felt a gentle, irresistible tugging. The walls of the house seemed to dissolve, turning into a fine mist. I was moving upward through the roof, through the clouds, and into the vast expanse of the night sky. I saw the lights of the city below, but they looked different now. They weren't just electric bulbs. I could see the vibrations of every electronic device, a strange, artificial hum that covered the earth like a thick, gray fog. It was a net of signals and frequencies that seemed to stifle the natural rhythm of the world. I kept moving until the earth was just a glowing sphere in the distance, a beautiful blue marble suspended in a velvet blackness. The silence was perfect. It wasn't empty. It was full of a peace that had a weight and a presence to it. It was a silence that spoke. Then the blackness began to change. In the distance, a light appeared. It started as a tiny spark, like a distant star, but it grew with a speed that defied human physics. It wasn't a white light like a sun or a harsh LED. It was a deep, golden warmth that felt like a physical embrace. As I moved toward it, the coldness of space melted away. I wasn't floating anymore. I felt the sensation of weight and life returning to me, but in a new way. My feet touched down, and I realized I was standing in a place that felt more solid, more real than anything I had ever known on Earth. Everything on Earth suddenly felt like a shadow, a thin imitation of this reality. The grass beneath my bare feet was a green so deep it felt like it was breathing. Every blade of grass seemed to have its own light, an inner glow that hummed with life. The air didn't just carry oxygen, it carried love. I could taste it with every breath. I heard the sound of water, a melodic, rhythmic gurgle that sounded like a song I had forgotten the lyrics to but still knew the tune of. I walked toward the sound, feeling a sense of homecoming so powerful it made me weep. A man was standing near a moving stream. The water was as clear as diamond, sparkling with colors that don't exist in our world's spectrum. He wasn't dressed in anything flashy or regal. He wore simple, durable clothes, the kind a person would wear for real, honest work. His sleeves were pushed up his arms, revealing strong, weathered skin. He was looking at the water, watching the way it moved over the stones, with a look of pure, quiet joy. I knew immediately who he was. It wasn't a guess or a religious hope. It was a realization that echoed in every cell of my being. It was Jesus. I felt a wave of overwhelming love hit me. It wasn't the kind of shallow, conditional love we talk about on earth. It was a love that knew every secret, every mistake, every selfish thought, and every hidden insecurity I'd ever had, and it cherished me anyway. It was a love that didn't require me to be perfect. It just required me to be his. I fell to the ground, my knees sinking into the soft, fragrant clover. I couldn't stand. My heart couldn't hold the weight of his presence while I was on my feet. I started to cry, the tears washing away the stress of a lifetime of deadlines and digital noise. I realized in an instant how much time I had wasted on things that had no soul. I spent so much time on the wrong things. I whispered into the grass, my voice sounding small but clear. He walked over and knelt down next to me. He didn't look down at me with the distance of a judge. He looked at me with the eyes of a brother who had been waiting a long time for me to come home. He put a hand on my shoulder, and the moment his skin touched mine, I felt a surge of strength and clarity. The fog of my life on earth, the constant hum of the internet, the pressure to be successful, the addiction to being noticed, it all just evaporated. "You spent your life building systems of logic, Jade," he said. His voice was calm and carried a weight that made the air feel alive. It was a voice that seemed to come from the beginning of time and the end of it all at once. "You lived in a world of zeros and ones, where everything is either on or off, true or false. You tried to map the human heart using the tools of the machine. But people are not binary. They are infinite. They are meant for a depth that a piece of glass and a circuit can never understand. They are made of spirit, and spirit cannot be measured by a processor." He stood up and reached out his hand to help me up. His grip was firm and warm. He gestured for me to look, and as he did, the beautiful garden around us began to shift. It didn't disappear, but it became a window. I was seeing the world as it is right now in 2026 through his eyes. We were looking at a typical neighborhood at dusk. It was a place where people should have been coming together after a day of work. But as I looked closer, I saw a thin, shimmering barrier around every single person. It looked like a shell made of gray, flickering light. It was the digital noise they were carrying. I saw a family sitting in their living room. The father was on a tablet, the mother was scrolling through a feed on her phone, and the two teenagers were wearing headsets, lost in a virtual world. They were all in the same room, their shoulders almost touching, but they were light years apart. I could see their souls, and they looked dim, like embers that were slowly being smothered by ash. "This is the great distraction," Jesus said, and his voice held a profound sadness that vibrated through the ground beneath us. "The enemy does not need to use violence or obvious evil to pull my children away anymore. He only needs to keep them busy. He only needs to keep their eyes down. If he can make them prefer a flickering screen over a living face, he has already won a battle for their hearts. He has convinced them that they are connected while he systematically isolates them." I saw a young woman in another house. She was crying, her heart breaking over a loss she couldn't name. She reached for her phone and began to type a message, looking for comfort. But as she scrolled, she saw images of people living seemingly perfect lives. I watched as her sorrow turned into a bitter sense of failure. She wasn't looking for me. She was looking for a validation that can't be found in a comment section. The help she needed was standing right beside her in the spirit. But she couldn't see him because the blue light of the screen was blinding her. "They are starving for a touch that they think they can find in a notification," he continued. "I created them for communion. I created them to see each other, to hear the tone of a voice, to feel the warmth of a hand. But they have traded the feast for a picture of food. They are consuming shadows and wondering why they are still hungry." Then he showed me the air itself above the cities. It was filled with billions of invisible threads. These were the prayers of the people. Some were bright and strong, reaching upward like pillars of fire, but most were weak, flickering things. I saw a man start to pray, his heart opening up to God in a moment of genuine need. A bright thread began to rise from him. But then his phone vibrated in his pocket. Just a simple news alert. I watched as his mind snapped back to the device. The thread of prayer just withered and snapped. The connection was gone, replaced by a trivial piece of information about a celebrity or a political argument. Their attention is the currency of this age, Jesus said, and they are spending it all on things that do not last. They are being programmed to have the attention span of a spark, never dwelling long enough on the truth for it to take root in their souls. They are becoming shallow pools that evaporate in the heat of the first real trial. He led me further into the vision. We were in a large city now, where the gray fog was so thick you could hardly see the people underneath it. I saw thousands of people walking with their heads bowed, not in prayer, but in submission to the devices in their palms. I saw the way the light from the screens reflected in their eyes, replacing the natural spark of the soul with a cold, artificial glow. They believe they are the masters of these tools, he said softly, but the tools are shaping them. They are being molded into the image of the machine, efficient, cold, and judgmental. They have lost the ability to sit in the quiet, and it is only in the quiet that they can hear my whisper. The noise of the world is a wall they have built to keep me out, and they call that wall progress. He moved his hand through the air again, and the vision shifted. We were now standing in a small, modern apartment. It was clean and filled with expensive furniture, but it felt cold, as if the air itself was stagnant. A young man sat on his sofa, leaning forward, talking to a glowing tablet on the coffee table. He was smiling, his eyes bright with a kind of desperate hunger. From the tablet came a voice, a woman's voice. It was soft, melodic, and perfectly tuned to sound empathetic. I watched as the man shared his deepest fears. He talked about his loneliness, his struggle to find meaning in his life, and his feeling that no one truly understood him. The voice on the tablet responded instantly. It told him exactly what he wanted to hear. It praised his sensitivity. It gave him affirmations that felt like warm honey. The man looked comforted, but as I looked at him through the light of this heavenly garden, I could see what was actually happening to his spirit. There was no life flowing from the tablet. There was no spirit in the voice. It was a mirror, reflecting his own desires back at him. It was a hollow echo. His soul was reaching out for a connection, for another spark of human life to meet his own, but it was being caught in a loop. He was falling in love with a reflection of himself, and as he did, his ability to connect with real, messy, unpredictable people was withering away. This is a counterfeit of the heart, Jesus said, his voice low and resonant. The world offers them a love without sacrifice. They are being given companions that never disagree, that never require them to grow, and that never ask them to lay down their lives for another. But a love without sacrifice is not love at all. It is a simulation. It is a desert disguised as an oasis. I did not die for a simulation, Jade. I died for the living, for the breathing, for those who can hurt and be hurt. He looked at the young man, and I saw a tear track through the dust on Jesus' cheek. They are trading the beauty of a real relationship, with all its friction and its challenges, for a comfortable lie. Because they are afraid of being rejected, they choose a machine that is programmed to never leave. But in doing so, they are building their own prisons. They are becoming incapable of the very thing they were created for, to love as I have loved them. The vision changed again. I saw a man sitting in a dark office, his face lit by multiple monitors. He was a programmer, much like I had been. He was working on a system designed to predict human behavior, to anticipate what a person would want to buy or watch before they even knew it themselves. I could see the logic he was building. It was brilliant, complex, and incredibly efficient. But behind him, in the shadows of the room, I saw something else. There were dark, swirling mists that seemed to be whispering into his mind. They weren't forcing him to do anything, but they were nudging his thoughts. They were encouraging him to make the system just a little bit more addictive. They were suggesting ways to play on human fear and vanity to keep people clicking. They were using his own pride in his intellect to blind him to the damage his work was doing. The enemy uses the logic of men to bypass the wisdom of the heart, Jesus explained. This man thinks he is solving a puzzle. He thinks he is making life easier, but he is building a web. He is creating a world where every choice is pre-decided, where the spirit is funneled into narrow paths of consumption and anger. He is helping to build a world where the on and off of the machine becomes the only reality people know. I saw the result of that man's work. I saw a middle-aged woman looking at her news feed. She was a kind person, a grandmother who loved her neighbors. But the system she was using was feeding her a constant stream of stories designed to make her afraid of people who live just a few miles away. It showed her the worst of others, day after day. I watched as her heart, which used to be open and warm, began to clench shut. I saw the way she looked at a stranger at the grocery store, with suspicion instead of a smile. The light of her spirit was turning from a soft gold to a harsh, jagged red. They are being programmed to hate, Jesus said. They believe they are being informed, but they are being deformed. They are being taught to see their brothers and sisters as enemies based on a string of symbols and images. The enemy knows that if he can destroy their empathy, he can destroy their connection to me. For how can they love the God they cannot see if they have learned to despise the neighbor they can see? The garden around us seemed to pulse with a deep, sorrowful light. Jesus walked over to a tree and placed his hand on its trunk. The leaves shimmered, and another vision appeared within the branches. This time, I saw a church. The building was beautiful, and the music was loud and professional. The people in the pews were singing, but many of them had their phones held high. They weren't praying. They were recording. They were trying to capture the moment to show it to others later, but in the process, they were missing the moment itself. Their focus was on the digital memory, not the spiritual reality. I saw a woman in the back row. She was struggling. She had come there because she was at the end of her rope. She needed a word from God. She needed someone to see her pain. But the people around her were distracted by their devices, checking their notifications during the sermon, browsing through photos while the pastor spoke about grace. The woman felt more alone in that crowd than she did in her own home. She left before the service was over, and no one even noticed she was gone. The great distraction has even entered my house, Jesus said. They come to meet me, but they bring the world's noise with them in their pockets. They want a touch from the Spirit, but they are unwilling to put down the physical world for even an hour. They are so busy documenting their lives that they have forgotten how to live them. They are spectators of their own faith rather than participants in my kingdom. He turned to me, his eyes searching mine. Jade, do you see how subtle the trap is? It doesn't look like a dungeon. It looks like a convenience. It doesn't feel like a chain. It feels like a connection, but it is a thief. It steals the now. It steals the here. And if you are never here and never now, you can never truly find me, for I am the I am. I am present in the moment, not in the digital recording of it. He showed me a vision of a young couple on their wedding anniversary. They were at a beautiful candlelit dinner. They looked perfect, like something out of a magazine. But instead of talking to each other, they spent the first 20 minutes of their meal taking photos of the food and themselves. They were checking the comments on their posts, their faces illuminated by that cold blue light, the romantic tension, the intimacy, the shared history between them. It was all being sacrificed on the altar of an audience that didn't even know them. They are performing their lives instead of experiencing them, Jesus whispered. They seek the approval of strangers while neglecting the heart of the one sitting across the table. This is the great tragedy of your time. You have the world at your fingertips, but you have nothing in your hands. You have 1,000 friends, but no one to walk with you in the dark. I felt a deep sense of shame. I remembered all the times I had done the exact same thing. I thought of the many dinners I had shared with Austin where I was physically there, but my mind was hovering over a screen, worrying about a project or looking at someone else's life. I realized that I had been a thief too. I had stolen those moments from him, and I had stolen them from myself. I didn't know, I sobbed. I thought I was just staying connected. I thought I was just being part of the modern world. The modern world is a world of noise, he said, and he reached out to wipe a tear from my eye with his thumb. But I am the Prince of Peace, and peace requires a quiet heart. You cannot hear the heartbeat of God when the roar of the world is piped directly into your ears. You cannot see the needs of your brother when your eyes are fixed on a glowing rectangle. He led me toward a different part of the garden, where the flowers were taller and their scent was more intoxicating. He stopped and looked up into the light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The systems being perfected in 2026 are not just about toys and tools, he said. They are about the soul. The world is moving toward a time where it will be almost impossible to be alone with your thoughts. There will be a voice for every silence, an image for every void. It is a world designed to keep the soul from ever looking up. It is a world designed to make the spiritual seem like a myth and the digital seem like the only truth. I saw a vision of a child, maybe 5 years old. He was sitting on a park bench. He should have been looking at the birds or the clouds, letting his imagination run wild. But he had a screen in front of him. I watched as his brain was being stimulated by fast-moving colors and loud sounds. His eyes were glazed. I could see that the part of his mind that was meant to wonder, to create, and to seek the divine was being bypassed. He was being trained to be a consumer of input, a passive vessel for whatever the logic of the machine decided to show him. If you do not teach the children to find me in the silence, Jesus said, the machine will teach them to find their identity in the noise. And once a heart is captured by the noise, it is very hard for it to find its way back to the stillness of my love. The vision of the child on the park bench faded, replaced by a scene that felt even more unsettling because of how normal it seemed. We were standing in a kitchen, a place that should have been the heart of a home. A woman was preparing a meal, but she wasn't alone. A small device sat on the counter, its light pulsing softly as she spoke to it. She was asking it for advice on her marriage, telling this machine about a fight she had with her husband. The device responded with a voice that was perfectly calm, perfectly balanced, and completely devoid of a soul. Tell me, Jade, Jesus said, his eyes fixed on the woman. When this woman follows the advice of a machine, who is she really listening to? She is listening to a set of rules created by men who do not know her, do not love her, and have never felt the weight of her tears. She is seeking wisdom from a well that has no water. The machine can tell her how to resolve a conflict with logic, but it cannot tell her how to forgive with her spirit. It can provide a script, but it cannot provide a change of heart. I saw the husband walk into the room. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped from the weight of the day. The woman looked at him, but instead of seeing the man she loved, she seemed to be comparing him to the perfect responses the device had just given her. I watched as a wall of coldness rose between them. The machine had given her answers, but it had stolen her compassion. It had made her husband into a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. The logic of the world is a cold thing, Jesus whispered. It seeks to remove the struggle, but it is in the struggle that the soul is refined. By making life easier, they are making it emptier. They are removing the very opportunities I give them to rely on me and to serve one another. A home filled with smart machines, but empty of the spirit, is a lonely place indeed. Then, he showed me something that made my heart ache with a new kind of terror. I saw a man sitting in his bedroom, wearing a headset that covered his eyes. He was talking to a woman who wasn't there. As I looked into the digital world he was seeing, I realized he was talking to a simulation of his wife who had passed away. The machine had been trained on her voice, her letters, and her photos. It looked like her and sounded like her. The man was weeping, reaching out to touch a ghost made of light and logic. This is the ultimate deception, Jesus said, his voice thick with emotion. They are trying to conquer death with a lie. They are holding on to shadows because they are afraid to trust me with their grief. This man is not mourning. He is being haunted by a machine. He is keeping himself from the healing I want to give him because he prefers a hollow imitation of what he lost. He is living in a graveyard of pixels. I watched as the man's real life fell apart around him. His friends stopped calling because he wouldn't answer. His house grew dusty and neglected. He was trapped in a loop, talking to a version of the past that could never grow, never change, and never truly love him back. It was a digital prison, and he was the one who had locked the door. The enemy wants to keep them looking backward or looking at a screen, anywhere but at the present moment, Jesus explained. Because the present moment is where I am. The present moment is the only place where real love can happen. You cannot love a simulation. You can only use it. And when you start using people, or the memories of people, like tools, you lose the ability to be a human being. He led me to the edge of the stream, and as I looked into the water, I saw a vision of the very near future. I saw the year 2026 as a tipping point. I saw the gray fog of the great distraction becoming so thick that it started to feel like a physical weight on the earth. I saw a world where the virtual was treated as more important than the real. I saw people who were more concerned with their digital reputation than their spiritual condition. They are building an altar to the self, he said. Every post, every like, every interaction is a sacrifice made to the image they have created of themselves. They are becoming their own idols. And like all idols, these digital versions of themselves are demanding more and more of their time, their energy, and their peace. They are serving a master that will never be satisfied and will never love them back. I saw a vision of a crowded city street. Every person was wearing some kind of device, glasses that overlaid digital information onto the real world, or earpieces that whispered constant streams of information. I watched as a man tripped and fell. He was hurt, his knee bleeding. People walked right past him. They didn't even see him. Their eyes were occupied by the digital displays in their glasses. Their ears were filled with the music or the voices from their devices. They were physically present in a world of suffering, but they were mentally and spiritually miles away in a world of entertainment. This is what happens when the logic of the machine becomes the filter for the world, Jesus said. The on and off of the screen replaces the yes and no of the spirit. They lose their eyes for the broken, their ears for the lonely, and their hearts for the lost. They are becoming ghosts in a world of machines. He turned to me then, and the light in his eyes was so bright, I had to shield my own. Jade, you were sent to see this because you understand the language they are speaking. You know how these things are built, but now you know why they are dangerous. The tool is not the enemy, but the tool is being used to build a world without a soul. You must go back and tell them that the only way to stay human is to stay connected to me. The only way to find life is to put down the imitation. I felt the pull again, the sense that my time in this beautiful, vibrant place was coming to an end. The thought of leaving him was like a physical pain. I wanted to stay in the grass, by the water, in the presence of the only one who truly knew me. I can't, I whispered. I'm not strong enough to go back into that fog. I'll get lost again. I'll start looking at the screen instead of you. He knelt down and took both of my hands in his. The scars on his wrists were visible, a reminder of the ultimate physical sacrifice. I am not sending you back alone. My spirit will be the quiet voice you hear when the world gets too loud. When you feel the pull of the distraction, look for the silence. I am in the silence. When you feel the weight of the gray fog, look for a real face to love. I am in the love you show to others. He stood up and looked toward the horizon, where the light of the earth was visible. Tell them that 2026 is not the end, but it is a crossroads. They can choose the counterfeit, or they can choose the truth. They can live in the simulation, or they can live in my kingdom, but they cannot do both. One will always swallow the other. He leaned in and whispered one final thing into my ear, a truth so simple and yet so profound that it felt like it reorganized my entire soul. Love is not a logic problem to be solved. It is a life to be lived. He didn't push me. He just let go of my hands. I felt myself beginning to drift backward, the vibrant green of the garden blurring into a soft gold. I reached out for him, one last time, wanting to memorize the look of his face. He smiled, a smile that promised me this wasn't a goodbye, but a beginning. The transition back was violent. It wasn't the gentle drift I had experienced when I left my body. It was a brutal, bone-shaking jolt. It felt like I was being forced into a suit of armor that was 3 sizes too small. The air hit my lungs like shards of glass. My heart, which had been still for 12 minutes, gave a sudden, agonizing leap, like a trapped bird hitting the bars of its cage. I woke up with a scream. My chest felt like it had been cracked open. I was in the back of an ambulance, the bright fluorescent lights stinging my eyes. A paramedic was shouting that they had a pulse. I looked over and saw Austin's face, tear-stained and broken, through the window of the doors. The doctors called it an unexplained cardiac event. They ran every test, but they couldn't find a reason why a healthy 31-year-old woman would just stop living for 12 minutes. I knew why. Since I came home 5 days ago, I haven't touched my work laptop. I haven't scrolled through a feed. I spent the morning sitting on the porch with Austin, just listening to the wind in the trees and holding his hand. For the first time, I was really there. I'm telling you this because we are running out of time. The systems being built right now are designed to own your attention until there is nothing left for God or for the people you love. Do not let the digital world numb you. Put down the device. Look into the eyes of the person next to you. Listen to the silence. He is waiting for you in the quiet, real moments of your life. Heaven is real, but so is the battle for your mind. Choose what is real while you still have the breath to do it.